Just to preface this review, there will be some minor spoilers for some side content, so if you're super sensitive to that stuff, maybe don't watch. Starfield, Bethesda Game Studios' first new IP in almost 3 decades, is a game that is marred by expectation. Announced all the way back in 2018, speculation immediately began on what exactly Starfield would be. There was little doubt that it would be a massive, sprawling RPG, but how exactly Bethesda would bring their tried and tested formula into the modern era was yet to be seen. With the success of Skyrim and Fallout 4, there was little reason to doubt Todd Howard and his team, but looming on the horizon was something that nobody could expect. Fallout 76. I'd rather not get too deep into this, but let's just say that Fallout 76 launched in an unacceptable technical state, riddled with bugs, a fundamentally boring and broken core gameplay loop, and some truly shocking design decisions around monetization that still to this day leave many with a sour taste in their mouth. The question around expectations persists, however. What exactly could Starfield be in a world post-76? Could this be the Skyrim in space that many hoped for? I think these questions around expectations are best framed with a story. At the VGX Awards in 2013, a new project from indie developer Hello Games was announced. A massive, open universe to explore, where you could pilot your own spacecraft and visit a seemingly endless amount of planets, each with unique and diverse ecosystems and a plethora of alien life. What was pictured was a universe that was not only inconceivably big, boasting what programmer Sean Murray described as 18 quintillion procedurally generated planets, but also teeming with activity and things to do. Space battles, trading, you name it. This game was aptly titled No Man's Sky. To say that this project garnered unprecedented attention for an indie game would be an understatement, attracting not only a large fan base, but also the eye of big publishers, all wanting a piece of the proverbial space pie. Sony would eventually showcase a new trailer at E3 in 2014, a first for an indie project, further cementing in the minds of consumers and the industry that No Man's Sky was sure to be the space exploration fantasy that they had always dreamed of. With all eyes on Hello Games, interview after interview with studio founder and programmer Sean Murray would confirm exactly what No Man's Sky was to be. In a now quite infamous clip from Game Informer, Murray would go on to announce a myriad of features to be present in the final product, including alien species to meaningfully interact with and online multiplayer. The hype train was building, and Hello Games was along for the ride. Murray and his cheerful personality won everyone over, and No Man's Sky was slated to be a commercial hit. No Man's Sky released in August of 2016 in what can only be described as one of the most disastrous launches in video game history. With poor performance, many features promised by Murray and the team either unfinished or missing outright, and a universe that, while vast, was fundamentally empty, consumers reasonably felt burned by Hello Games, and the backlash the studio received was immense to say the least. What is the purpose of a vast universe to explore if there's nothing interesting to do in it? I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. While No Man's Sky has since evolved into a very competent game, boasting a lot of its initially promised features, the reputation that it garnered is forever tarnished by its launch. What is sure is that Hello Games will be forever careful of over-promising and under-delivering. Now, Starfield was a bit of a hard game to pin down pre-launch. It was clear that it'd be an RPG like most Bethesda games prior, but it also had this vague aura of mystery surrounding it in regards of what exactly the player would be able to do. Todd Howard then famously announced that the game would contain over 100 star systems and over 1,000 planets, all open for you to explore. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't immediately hit by Vietnam flashbacks to the initial hype cycle of No Man's Sky. Let's cut to the chase. Is Starfield a good game? Yes, it absolutely is. However, to some degree, Bethesda's reputation and their commitment to outdated design principles contribute a lot into obscuring just why this is. I'm James Jensen for Reset Button, and this is my review of Starfield. Starfield's narrative starts off sort of shrouded in mystery. You play as a deep space mining contractor and are tasked with recovering an object of unknown origin from a mine site in a far-off system. Upon retrieval of said artifact, you're rendered unconscious and met with visual and auditory hallucinations, which you will soon learn are part of a larger mystery that the game will spin. Awoken by your co-workers sometime later, the mine site is then attacked by the Crimson Fleet, Starfield's band of space pirates, and in an effort to escape, you are tasked with delivering the artifact to an organization known only as Constellation, a ragtag group of scientists and explorers with the esteemed goal of discovering the secrets of the universe. What follows, while quite slow to start, is a compelling and intriguing story following Constellation's plight to retrieve the artifacts across the settled systems and discover the true meaning behind them. While there are some flashy set-piece encounters along the main questline, I think the most compelling aspect of Starfield's story is its characters.
Welcome to Constellation. We have a lot to talk about.
Constellation is rather eclectic in its composition, with not only scientists but retired military, industrialist investors, and the blunt but compassionate robot companion Vasco, and genuinely ends up feeling like a tight-knit group of people by the game's conclusion. My favourite of this crew by far ended up being Barrett, the intelligent, loudmouth, risk-taking scientist who slowly opens up about his troubled past over the course of the game. In typical Bethesda fashion, there are 4 companion characters that can accompany you across your journey, Barrett being one, each boasting a surprisingly in-depth and lengthy questline regarding past struggles and overcoming trauma. There is a fair amount of variety in these questlines, with each character sending you to different parts of the galaxy in order to assist them in their endeavours. Sarah Morgan, Constellation's leader, has a particularly interesting story about her time as a navigator in the game's Colony War. What I enjoyed most about Starfield was its commitment to world building, really rewarding players that put in the time to understand its universe, not just through voice logs and terminal entries, but through actual locations that feel realized enough to actually exist. The year is 2330, and a catastrophe has left the Earth uninhabitable, forcing humanity to find refuge among the stars, made possible through the invention of faster-than-light travel. The game's major city, New Atlantis in Alpha Centauri, has an in-game museum dedicated to explaining humanity's expansion, often through the typical one-sided lens that these displays tend to have. New Atlantis contains embassies for the game's major factions, shopping and residential districts, and the slum-like Well and Constellation's home base, and genuinely has a sense of place, and is a massive step up from Bethesda's previous major settlements. Other areas include Aquila City, the capital of the Free Star Collective, Starfield's very own band of space cowboys, which contrasts heavily to the United Colonies, which much more closely mimics what one would expect from an interstellar government. The most interesting, in my opinion, was Neon, a considerably more lawless pleasure city built on a fishing rig where megacorporations and smugglers coexist, looking to circumvent the rules and regulations of the United Colonies. These places feel not only inhabited, but the focus that Bethesda has placed on realistic depictions of industry does a lot to make them feel more believable. Spaceship manufacturers, shady corporations, and large-scale mining operations all exist in a somewhat realistic fashion, as well as space pirate brigands, mercenaries, treasure collectors, and religious groups. A lot of work has clearly been put into making this world as believable as possible, and hats off to Bethesda's writers for pulling it off. Each faction has an accompanying questline, and while Starfield's main narrative is definitely worth experiencing, a lot of its side content is just as interesting, if not better, than the main quest. Neon's Ryujin Industries has a particularly fun group of quests, seeing you climb the corporate ladder, going from delivering coffee to an executive meeting to enacting full-scale corporate espionage, with the typical tongue-in-cheek humour you would expect from a premise so absurd. What feels essential, however, is the UC Vanguard questline, following the sudden outbreak of an alien super predator and a group of scientists doing whatever's necessary to save humanity. The work put into these quests means that they often don't really feel like side content, but a major gripe I have with their implementation is that their outcomes unfortunately don't affect the main plot in any way. These quests feel deep and intriguing, placing you in a lot of morally grey situations and asking you to make some tough decisions, but ultimately are inconsequential due to their lack of impact on the story. And this is what leads into one of Starfield's biggest problems. While quests individually often feel quite well written and structured, they can feel disjointed when it comes to the context of the game as a whole. Where something like The Witcher 3 had side quests that in the moment could feel rather insignificant, they would often recontextualize themselves in ways later on, not just affecting the main story, but doing so in ways that you often might not expect. Starfield just never does this. The Freestar Collective questline is its own thing. The UC Vanguard questline is its own thing, and while they may be compelling in their own right, outside of a few comments from certain civilians, they almost have no impact on the world at large, and for an RPG of this type, leaves the world feeling quite unreactive and static, and Starfield feeling quite dated in comparison to other offerings from the genre. Another issue is the game's heavy reliance on outdated design principles, making it feel quite old. And I don't mean old in the retro sense, I mean old as in Starfield feels like it could have released 10 years ago. It puts the whole Skyrim in space comparison in a new light. Bethesda games, and this game by proxy, have always had this problem with absolutely shocking UI and inventory management systems, asking you to navigate through 4 different menus in order to find some poorly labeled item to cure an illness of unknown origin. So many times while exploring a planet, I would be given some random negative status effect and have to shuffle through my 150 different healing items in order to find the one to fix this extremely specific condition. This is not just a problem with healing items, mind you. The game doesn't tell you just how much ammo you have for specific weapons when hovering over them, meaning that you either need to equip them, pull them out only to find that you have no bullets, go back into the menu and equip another weapon, or check what ammo type the weapon takes, go into another fucking menu just to see how many bullets you have out of more than 20 different ammo types, and then go back into your weapons menu to select a gun that you may not even have ammo for because it's so unclear. Maybe I'm just stupid, but to me this inventory system is an absolute nuisance, and it's a real shame that Bethesda has made almost no meaningful updates to it since Skyrim. The rest of Starfield's UI is unfortunately just as bad as its inventory. Clunky menu navigation is required for practically everything: selecting quests, fast travel, upgrading skills, looking at your ships and crew members. Everything revolves around this poorly laid out and unclear menu, which might be fine if you weren't asked to interact with it so often. Don't even get me started on the ship builder, which feels like it was tailor-made just to piss me off. Where this is most problematic is when we start talking about space travel. In a game so heavily marketed as being about exploring the stars, there is such little time spent piloting your ship outside of some competent yet unremarkable ship combat. Don't think that you'll be able to fly to a planet in Starfield. Travel around the galaxy involves, you guessed it, going into a menu, clicking on a planet, clicking fast travel, waiting for a loading screen, going back into the same menu, clicking on the same planet, clicking fast travel again, waiting for another loading screen, waiting for a landing animation, exiting your ship, waiting for another loading screen. You get the idea. While I understand why it's like this, oftentimes it feels as if the space exploration fantasy idea really works against Starfield, as its over-reliance on menus does little other than to just break immersion. Poor design aside, one area where Starfield excels is its implementation of certain RPG systems into its gameplay, particularly pertaining to dialogue. Certain skills or traits that you can spec into can have a genuine and sometimes unexpected outcome when it comes to character interactions, and with Starfield's persuasion dialogue system, certain skills actually feel quite useful, allowing you to barter or appeal to certain characters' specific traits. Starfield, like any other Bethesda RPG, is primarily a game about conversation, and I'm happy to say that it definitely succeeds on this front, with buildcraft actually affecting certain outcomes and how you are able to approach situations. Your equipped gear also has some bearing on this, and I found myself frequently swapping kit out based on how I wanted to approach certain situations. Social skills can also have some effect on combat, but their clumsy implementation often made them feel quite bothersome to execute, so I mostly avoided it. Speaking of combat, I'm happy to say that things are mostly pretty good here. Guns feel meaningfully varied, each allowing for a unique playstyle, and the implementation of the jetpack really incentivizes the player to push forward, leaving combat feeling fresh and interesting. Whilst not mechanically deep or particularly flexible, the gunplay is definitely serviceable, but is clearly not the focus of the game. Weapon skills are mostly limited to simple stat increases, and whilst there is the potential for stealth, enemy pathing and sightlines were clearly not designed for it outside of a select few missions. Combat encounters with human enemies can end up feeling quite samey by the end of the game, but there is also some variety in enemy design with some alien creatures. A particularly memorable combat scenario saw me swarmed by alien bugs in an underground prison, and while these are few and far between, it's still a standout. Space combat is a little more complex, allowing you to pilot your ship in dogfights, managing resources and maintaining appropriate positioning versus your enemies. There are many more skills to spec into in this regard, and it's clear that Bethesda thought this was a highlight of the game. Whilst initially interesting, the limitations of the system are quite clear, and unfortunately, every combat encounter ends up feeling quite similar by the end of the game. Destroy your enemy's shield with a laser weapon, and fire missiles to finish them off. Your crewmates and their stats supposedly have some impact on your ship's combat capabilities, but outside of some minor stat and damage increases, the differences seem so inconsequential that you probably won't spend much time optimizing your crew for combat. It's definitely serviceable, but nothing here is really outstanding. One of Starfield's major systems involves the exploration of the galaxy at large. You can warp to any star in the galaxy, land on any planet, and explore a procedurally generated map, some with abandoned outposts, mining camps, and the like, some with alien life, hostile or otherwise, and some, well, most with nothing at all. Again, I ask, what is the purpose of a vast universe to explore if there's nothing interesting to do in it? And herein lies the fundamental issue with Starfield and its design. A bit of that Bethesda magic is lost in its relentless chase of scale. And don't get me wrong, the scale is impressive, but much of what makes games like Skyrim and Fallout 4 so beloved are those quiet, unexpected moments when traveling between major settlements. Running into a Brotherhood of Steel patrol in the New England wilderness and exchanging a few words, Moments like these mean something in a Bethesda game. These unfortunately just don't exist here, replaced instead by barren, empty landscapes that feel so pointless to move through outside of farming resources, laid in between fast travel and loading screens. There is no sense of discovery, no sense of just what will I find on the other side of this mountain. Almost 100% of the time, the answer will be nothing. And when it isn't nothing, finding the same copy-paste mining camp that you've seen 10 times before is seldom worth the effort to go and investigate anyway. What's worse is when this pervasive design leaches into the otherwise excellent main quest, forcing you to land on otherwise barren planets to collect Skyrim-style spells, which, for me, never really gelled with the rest of the game thematically. It was often more of a nuisance than it was worth. There are 24 of these to collect, meaning there are 24 instances in which you have to go to uninhabited planet X, walk for 2 minutes to a building, fly around for a minute, and then leave. Every one of these detours I found disinteresting, apart from one related to a companion quest near the end of my nearly 50-hour playthrough, which offered some really heartfelt dialogue and spoke truly to the themes of the narrative. It's a shame that there wasn't more of this. Another star of the show, pun intended, is presentation. This is another aspect of Starfield that is actually quite remarkable. Spaces in this game have this retro future aesthetic Bethesda describes as NASA punk, and while maybe a little corny, I think really accurately gives an idea for the kind of architecture and design that you'll be seeing in most cases. I think the art does a lot to make Starfield's more futuristic elements, being space travel and laser weapons, feel much more grounded overall. Highly detailed gauges and dials clutter your cockpit, leaning more into the idea of what space travel might actually look like rather than opting for a totally futuristic palette. Cities are gorgeously detailed and well realized, with a good amount of thought going into how people will actually live and function in these spaces, like the oil rig-inspired Neon or the underbelly of New Atlantis. This also extends to many of Starfield's secondary planets, many doubling as vessels that echo the game's themes. Red Mile and Paradiso both springing to mind, both of these housing interesting yet somewhat uneventful side quests. The sheer scale and variety on display here is a triumph. If more of Bethesda's spaces were intentionally crafted like this, the game would feel much less disjointed and dilapidated overall. Yet, the 1,000 planet paradigm still persists. One area where the game has received criticism is its facial animation. And for a game that relies heavily on close-ups of people's faces during conversation, I have to say, I don't really agree with a lot of the negative sentiment here. Character models, particularly those of the main cast, look pretty great, and while Bethesda won't win any awards here for best-in-class facial animations or anything, they're certainly serviceable and unequivocally a huge step up from Bethesda's previous offerings. I think, as a complete package, Starfield definitely has something to offer. Replayability through an interesting New Game Plus mode, some seriously good storytelling, and a vast amount of side content. There's definitely a lot here. This begs the question, even with swaths of content, a great narrative, and impressive presentation, is Starfield worth your time? Any other year, I would have said unequivocally yes. But this is not just any other year. This is 2023, a year chock full of banger releases, genre-defining masterpieces seemingly releasing every other month, and with so many incredible options vying for your time and attention, I'm just not sure that Starfield does enough to stand out. While I certainly enjoyed my time with it, I definitely won't be coming back, as system level frustrations really ground my gears, despite some quality writing and some workable combat. Does Starfield redeem Bethesda from the atrocity that was Fallout 76? Maybe? It's a hard question to answer, especially due to its reliance on some seriously old design principles with an inventory system straight out of 2011, clunky UI, and heavy, unavoidable use of fast travel. Despite these flaws, the settled systems still feel like one of the most well-realized game worlds in recent memory, with a typical Bethesda commitment to lore and world building. It's a real shame then that Starfield tries to do and be more than the game systems can reasonably handle, taking some truly great moments and sullying them with frustrating design. There are some good ideas here, and even though I enjoyed Starfield, it ultimately fails to sufficiently modernize the Bethesda formula, and thus, I can't recommend it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I know this was a bit of a longer one, so I really appreciate the time you've spent sitting through it. It would really help me out if you could like the video and maybe subscribe to the channel. Hope you have a wonderful day.